Public Investment Corporation. She's also a former chairperson for the Land and Agricultural Development Bank of South Africa. Ms. Nkosi holds an MBA and a postgraduate diploma from the Gordon Institute of Business Science and a BS in Agricultural Economics from the University of Pretoria. So you can hear we are here talking about an expert in the field. And I am very interested in learning what you can say to start this very important discussion with us. Therefore, I warmly welcome you to the scene, please. Help me in welcoming her to the scene. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and good afternoon, Honourable Members and distinguished colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this very important discussion. My hope today is to challenge us into thinking about this topic differently, but also provoke new ways of thinking about the tools at our disposal when we think about funding women-owned cooperatives and agricultural businesses. So I'll start with briefly setting the scene, just to orientate all of us. So across the world, we all know that women are the backbone of agricultural and food systems. We produce the food, we sell it, and we feed entire communities and our households. And in many regions, particularly in the developing world, women make up about 40 to 60% of the labor force in those countries. And yet, only 10% of credit flows to women-owned enterprises, and less than 5% of the agricultural extension assistance available goes towards these women. And this is not just a small efficiency gap, it's a massive economic distortion. The Food and Agriculture Organization, which conducts research on the agri-food system, including gender issues in the system, estimates that if we were to close the gender gap in agriculture, we could increase farm yields by up to 30%. And that really means dealing with issues around food insecurity and really bringing millions out of poverty. Other institutions like the World Bank or the OECD have calculated that if we were to narrow this gender gap, we could add up to 1% to the global GDP, and that is significant. So I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, and the evidence is overwhelming. For many of us here, the importance of supporting women-backed enterprises and cooperatives is self-evident. And yet, the reality is quite sobering, right? Because after decades of advocacy and political commitments, finance for women-owned cooperatives remains inadequate. It remains fragmented, and often it's confined to small pilot programs. And we need to ask ourselves why that is. Now, this is a question that has really plagued me for about 2 decades as an agricultural financier. And I've reached a blunt realization that I will share with you. And the blunt truth is this: banks and financiers will fund just about anything. And I do mean anything, if it makes them money, right? Banks and financiers finance terrorism. They finance the riskiest of speculative assets like cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens, which are just pictures of monkeys. They finance companies that will later collapse in absolute disgrace. And so when I think about all that financiers will fund, it is inconceivable that they would fund all these things, but somehow draw the line at women-controlled agricultural projects. So with this reality, we then have to realize, or what I have realized is, the problem is not that banks hold a deliberate bias against women. And it's not that they can't see the socio-economic benefits that we all talk about. The problem I have found is that women-backed enterprises are often not presented in a manner that is financially lucrative and viable for these financiers. Across commercial banking, development finance, government-backed schemes, all things that I participated in, the pattern is consistent. If the numbers work, the capital will flow. And if the numbers don't work, no amount of policy or goodwill will close the gap. So that means that our task, as we discuss this issue of funding women cooperatives in agriculture, as lawmakers, as policy shapers, as development leaders, we need to design interventions that lower the barriers to finance for women. And in a way that requires us to almost see the lens through the eyes of the financier. So that is what I have tried to do today, to really bridge the gap between lawmakers and finance, hopefully to get to practical solutions around this issue. So to start with, in the eyes of a financier, every deal, whether in mining, infrastructure, agriculture, whichever sector, it boils down to just two factors: transaction costs and credit risk. So every barrier that women face, things like a lack of collateral, exclusion from formal value chains, vulnerability to climate shocks, feeds into one or both of these factors: transaction costs or credit risk. And I've seen this repeatedly, whether in the public or the private sector. The questions when a deal is presented or when a project is presented always boils down to transaction costs and credit risk. So our jobs here is quite simple to state, but it is very difficult to achieve. If we can bring down both transaction costs and credit risk for women, the capital will flow, and of course the projects that we want to see will be funded. I'll start with the issue of transaction costs. And these are, to put it simply, everything that a bank or a financier spends to find, to assess, and to monitor a loan. So the costs just around that. And for women farmers, what we often see is that our transactions tend to be very many. They tend to be quite small. And that, of course, increases the transaction costs. So where a financier has to engage with a lot of small farmers at very small transaction sizes, they think twice, because in essence it costs just as much to evaluate a small transaction as it does a big one. So this is a deterrent. And in an environment where there is a competition for capital, all other sectors are competing for the same pool of funds that we are after. These are things that we need to consider. So there are a number of innovative ways to cut these transaction costs, and I'll just name a few here, and I'm sure there'll be many that come from different countries around the world. The first is, of course, first mechanism to bring down these costs is to put women in cooperative structures, which I'm glad to see that that is already the thinking here. So instead of funding 100 small transactions, there is one cooperative, one counterparty for the bank to negotiate with, one set of financials, etc. And this, of course, really eases the cost of doing business for both the financier and the cooperatives. The second that I've seen, which I must admit as South Africa we're a little bit behind on, is the issue of digital finance and electronic KYC. So that is the due diligence that is, of course, a big cost to any financier. So things like mobile onboarding, remote credit scoring, digital payments, these all really reduce the foot time that the banker needs to go to the ground, etc. And of course, has very beneficial effects for smaller projects. The other is bundled services. What we have seen work very, very well, especially among agribusinesses, is where you are able to look at the client holistically. So instead of just focusing on funding a farmer and just giving them finance, you also look at things like input supply, you look at things like storage, cold storage, etc. And that makes the client a little bit more lucrative. And I find that when the engagement, especially from policymakers, happens with financiers, with these additional services, the profitability of the client seems to be quite a lure, and the discussion becomes a little bit easier. And there are a number of different models that I've seen work very well. In India, for instance, you have the self-help group linkage program, which uses many of these techniques to great effect. You have Ethiopia's Women Entrepreneurship Development Project, and Brazil's women-led cooperatives, which really lead the charge. And really quite great case studies for us practitioners in the sector, where they have really aggregated and digitized repayments for women, and that has had great effect. The second factor that I mentioned that we need to bring down is credit risk. And credit risk is all about the question, will this loan be repaid? That's all they want to know. And women are often judged as riskier clients for a number of reasons. I'll just highlight a few. The first is that we tend to have insecure land tenure and limited collateral. And in the earlier session, we spoke about the precarious tenure situation of a lot of women when it comes to, and this, I believe, is an issue across the developing world. The second factor is that we have unstable market access and very little proof of predictable future income when it comes to women entrepreneurs. The third is that women tend to be disproportionately exposed to climate risks without the underlying insurance to really manage this risk. So there are a number of ways just to deal with these three factors that contribute most to credit risk. And I'm just putting them out there, really hoping that they will stimulate some thought and really that we can come to a solution that perhaps, amplifies these. The first is alternative collateral. So where women have a precarious tenure situation, they don't have access to titled land, they don't own the land, they can't inherit, etc., we find that financiers often need to be incentivized to look at alternative collateral. Things like group guarantees, warehouse receipts, long-term leases that can be tradable and really put in the place of collateral. And this is something that we did even at the Land Bank, where I served as the chair, where we started to look at alternative forms of collateral to really expand access to finance. In Kenya, you have the MSME credit guarantee that can stand in place for title deeds. So these are the type of models that I've seen working quite well. The second is offtake contracts and really making sure that we don't just focus on the funding aspect when it comes to women, but we also think about market, because we need to deal with both sides of the equation, not just the funding, but also how do these women get cash flow into those businesses so they are in fact bankable. And what we find is that women entrepreneurs tend to be excluded from formal established value chains. So, without reliable buyers, lenders will hesitate, right? So we need to have transparent and enforceable contracts with supermarkets, with processors, with exporters to really create predictable cash flows for these women. And then lastly, what works well in bringing down the credit risk is insurance, because you could wipe out all the gains from development in one season. One drought, one hail, and it's so important that we decrease the vulnerability of women entrepreneurs in agriculture through instruments like insurance. So weather insurance, weather index insurance, yield insurance, and these have been tested in a number of African countries to great effect, but what we need is parliaments that really support these insurance products with weather data infrastructure, public reinsurance scheme, and oversight over concessional loans across development finance entities that are linked to insurance participation. Before I close, as I was thinking about this issue, I think it's important that we think a little bit broadly. It's important to remember that women-controlled enterprises, cooperatives, projects, etc., exist in a broader context. They don't exist in a vacuum. So they exist in the greater agricultural sector. And the reality is the agricultural sector itself has been struggling to attract capital for many, many years. In sub-Saharan Africa, where I operate, the sector contributes about 22% to GDP, give or take. It employs about 40% of employment in a number of countries, and yet less than 10% of bank credit goes towards the sector. And more than 3/4, or roughly 3/4, of SMMEs in agriculture complain about a lack of access to finance, more than in any other sector. And that's because what bankers have found is that the agricultural sector gives rise to more non-performing loans. It's riskier. Operational costs are higher. The agricultural sector is disproportionately affected by things like poor rural infrastructure. So, where, for instance, you have local governments or municipalities that aren't operating as they should, the brunt of this is felt by those small farmers because they have to transport their goods from the rural towns to the ports, etc. And so, in essence, we find that these are bigger issues that affect the agricultural sector and trickle down to women, and we must deal with the broader agricultural sectors while we are looking at the issue of funding women. So while our interventions might be gender sensitive, and of course they need to be, we must also remain focused on the need to strengthen agriculture as a whole and make it a viable and attractive home for capital through the broader macro interventions that are needed. And then just to, as I was reading the briefs here, honourable members, I thought that it's important that we be reminded that when we are looking at these type of kind of women-owned enterprise, it's important to realize that this is not a homogeneous grouping. It's a very diverse grouping with different needs, and the temptation as we are discussing these type of projects is to really, in our mind's eye, to have in mind a small village, ladies, small chickens, and those are important projects, they really are. But we must think broader as women to understand that women have broad ambitions for themselves. So we cannot think that women cooperatives and women-funded projects mean small backyard farming. We really have, if we are to equalize here, we must focus on viable commercial entities run by women, and that is the aspiration that women want. And these are the kind of women that I've engaged with, that they say, we are tired of constantly being called emerging. We are proper business people, and so the interventions need to be entrepreneur-focused rather than paternalistic and small. So in closing, what can parliamentarians and policymakers do? And I just thought of a few interventions that if we are to and we accept that banks are really looking for financially viable transactions, then our policy levers become clearer in our eyes. So first of all, we need to enact and we need to enforce joint titling and spousal consent to unlock collateral. So the archaic practices that we discussed earlier around inheritance, around ownership, those are basics that must be dealt with if we are to deal with the issue of collateral. Secondly, we must require banks to recognize alternative forms of collateral, such as, not just mortgages, but we need to look at production, we need to look at tradable leases, and these can be enacted in legislation. A lot of financiers are constrained by the legislative environment when it comes to collateral, so we need to open up that space so that they can get more creative. Thirdly, we need to look at enforceable contract farming frameworks and also reserve, where we can, portions of public procurement for women-led enterprises. So where the state and the entities that we control have the power to empower women, to procure from women, to assist women in the value chain, then we ought to be able to do that. Fourth, we need to invest in weather stations, satellite data, other forms of data, because without this data, which we really struggle with in the developing world in particular, we can't track our progress, we don't know where we are. So it really becomes quite difficult to have gender-focused policies and interventions without a proper data backing. And then we need to look at how it is that we can properly support aggregation hubs. Things like logistics hub, agri-processing hubs, etc. And these require government spending, and they require policymakers to create them because they become a public good for all. So where there are opportunities to lower the cost of infrastructure and transaction for farmers, we need to be able to participate there. So there are a number of different interventions, and I'm sure we'll get to them in this room, but what is important here is that we need not just abstract commitments, but really tangible and concrete steps that align law and policy and finance, that we can start to make progress here. I have been in this agricultural finance space for close to 2 decades now, and the one thing I always say is finance is not altruistic, it's not charity. It really is a commercial opportunity, and we need to start looking at funding women businesses in that way. It really is about pricing, risk, and cost. And if we lower transaction costs and credit risk for women-owned agricultural enterprises, the money will follow. Financiers will fund it, but we really need to start thinking about the barriers here. And we can't go at this alone, which is why we need to bridge this gap between ourselves and financiers, because policymakers can only go as far. We can have grants, we can have state subsidies, etc. But the capital markets need to come in if we are to make these markets more efficient. So we know the tools that we need to use, cooperatives and producer organizations. We know that we need to have digital onboarding, enforceable offtake contracts, etc. And these need to be hardwired into law and into public finance. I think if we do these things and we have tangible and practical solutions, over the next decade, we will have women-owned enterprises, not just on the periphery of the agricultural sector, but really in the margins of the agricultural markets, really driving food security, rural jobs, and that is the opportunity here today to get to those tangible solutions. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, good afternoon. Let me recognize the Honourable Speaker in our presence. Thank you very much. And greet every parliamentarian and ladies and gentlemen. For the second time, I stand before you today. Maybe before I talk about Tabi, let me remind you that we have the form that you have to complete for you to be able to speak. If you would like to speak, there is the form right in front of you. Please do write and bring it forward. Tabi, thank you very much for the input, which was very insightful on what could be done, to assist in the agricultural funding for women-owned businesses or projects and cooperatives. And you gave us, a breakdown of what is your proposal in terms of what we can do to assist small businesses in agriculture. The issues around managing credit risks, and I hear you when you say that if we reduce the credit risk, then the money will flow. Difficult as it is, and I think I'll leave it to the members of parliament here, because you also gave proposals of what women parliamentarians can influence the processes of policy making and legislating the policies to make laws that would be women friendly in terms of funding. So as you were speaking and you spoke about the SMMEs, I was thinking about a very small area in Mpumalanga, Tabi, women who are in the sugarcane industry, who struggle on a daily basis because of the operational costs, and that in the value chain at the end they get less than what is supposed to be due to them, because they must have seasonal workers, they must have transport that transport their sugarcane to the mill, and at the end they become victims, and everyone else has gotten all the money that was supposed to go to women. So we thank you very much for the insightful presentation that you made to us today. We have taken to heart the proposals that you've made as members of parliament in different countries, and the members here will interact with you, and that's why we're requesting them to be able to fill in the forms. My colleague here, Honorable Sheldemos, told me that she already has forms that have been completed of women that would like to make an input. So let me invite you back on the stage, Honorable Sheldemos. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Also, a big thanks to you for this and also for our speaker. Well, it's true that I have 3 requests for taking the floor in this working session, but the 2 of them are excused right now because they are outside the room. They will come a little later. So I will really want to invite you to write the form, give it to us so we can make sure that we have a fruitful exchange of view. But I do have one speaker here now, and that is the Speaker of the Senate of Canada, Raymond Gange, and I will give you the floor. And thank you very much for staying here in the room. Thank you. Please.
Hello, bonjour, bonjour tout le monde, distinguished speakers and deputy speakers, distinguished guests. It's really nice to be here in South Africa. Coming from Canada, let's say that this is my first time here in South Africa, and I will be coming back. What a beautiful country. You know, today I'm honored to speak to you about a very important topic, resource mobilization and funding for women-owned agricultural cooperatives and projects. I am a member of a co-op, and I'm also, I was born and raised on a farm, so it is certainly a very appropriate topic for me. We know that globally, women play a vital role in agriculture and make up nearly 50% of the agricultural labor force. In developing countries, this share rises to between 60 and 80%. In sub-Saharan African countries, for example, 66% of women's employment is in agri-food systems, compared with 60% of men's employment. Despite their significant contributions, women farmers and entrepreneurs face ongoing barriers to accessing land, capital, credit, technology, and training, as you already mentioned. These challenges limit their productivity and consequently their ability to improve livelihoods, contribute to food security, and drive local development. One approach that has proved successful in helping lift some of the barriers I mentioned in creating social and economic change is the use of cooperatives. Indeed, cooperatives have a proud history in Canada, including the larger ones, financial ones such as Desjardins and Case Alliance, to the smaller ones such as the Red River Co-op, which I am a member of. And they have a wide range of offerings, such as food stores to insurance. And as I mentioned, the range is quite substantial. In addition to federal government support, most provinces and territories have most provinces and territories have cooperative associations or councils that provide information about starting up and growing the cooperatives. So they are assisted, and they have, a lot of them also have a focus on women. Women-led cooperatives are vehicles of empowerment and gender equality. Through these collective organizations, women pool their resources, knowledge, and skills to achieve economies of scale, reduce costs, and increase their bargaining power. However, the success of women-led cooperatives depends on access to adequate financing and resources. To unlock this potential, we must address the financing gap. We need innovative and inclusive financing mechanism and prioritize women's enterprises. Multiple stakeholders, including governments, financial institutions, non-governmental organizations, the private sector, have roles to play. And policies must be reformed to improve the women's access to land rights, credit, and training. Support for women's cooperatives and women-led agricultural projects is essential to food security and the local economy. It is essential to finance local organizations that are rooted in their communities. Canadian aid already supports several of these initiatives, and we must continue this commitment. However, in a tense geopolitical context, budgets are being redirected toward defense to the detriment of humanitarian aid. It is therefore crucial to advocate for a better distribution of resources. I just want to make another statement, and as many countries, as I said, increase defense spending at the expense of sustainable development and inclusive growth, we must ask ourselves, what more can be done to communicate the connections between gender equality and peace and security? Because lasting peace depends on women. Thank you. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much for this. I applaud as well. The next speaker is from Italy, Honorable Patriarchia. Please, the floor is yours.
Gentili colleghe, è per me un onore intervenire oggi
to address this important forum dedicated to women in agriculture. This sector not only plays a crucial role in our economy, but it also offers meaningful opportunities for women's autonomy and emancipation. Agriculture is closely linked to the future of our communities, food security, and the development of fair and sustainable economies. Women play an essential role in agriculture worldwide. In many countries, they perform essential tasks in production, livestock care, harvesting, processing, and management of natural resources. Yet, their access to resources, whether they are land, credit, technology, or markets, is often limited by structural, cultural, and institutional barriers. One key barrier is the issue of women owning land. In many jurisdictions, women do not have equal access to land ownership and do not have equal rights to inheritance. This reduces their ability to independently make decisions about agricultural investment, innovation, and sustainable management. Women's agricultural cooperatives are a promising model. By joining forces, women can achieve economies of scale, greater bargaining power, and better access to markets, supply chains, and support services. However, such cooperatives often face obstacles in raising capital, bureaucracy, lack of guarantees, gender bias, and the lack of dedicated policies. In Italy, agriculture has always been a field in which women have played an active role, and in recent years there has been a growing appreciation of the role of women agricultural entrepreneurs. We have numerous initiatives in this sector. For example, there are 2 initiatives that are run by public bodies, such as the Ministry of Agricultural Policies, not to mention an institute devoted to this issue. They provide financial support and incentives to encourage generational change and women entrepreneurs in the agricultural sector through non-repayable loans and zero-interest mortgages. And then there is an initiative with those who find it difficult to get access to traditional credits, and then traditional credit. And there is another initiative that helps all women-led agricultural initiatives. There is another initiative that brings women entrepreneurs together under an organization called Confagricoltura, with the aim of promoting women's entrepreneurship and equal opportunities in agriculture. Another initiative promotes the inclusion of women in the agricultural sector. Moreover, various committees for women's entrepreneurship have also been established by the Chambers of Commerce. All of these initiatives have shed light on and supported women's work in the sector by offering training, access to finance, and networking opportunities. These programs not only help to develop skills, but they also contribute to creating a supportive community among women entrepreneurs. The European Union is promoting several initiatives to encourage women's entrepreneurship in agriculture. The Horizon Europe programme and the Common Agricultural Policy include specific measures to support women in agriculture by providing funds for innovative and sustainable projects. In addition, Europe has launched campaigns to encourage young women to pursue careers in agriculture, thereby recognizing the importance of cooperation and innovation. It is crucial that we continue to promote these initiatives and work together to break down the barriers that still exist. We must ensure that women have access to resources, training, and markets so that they can fulfill their potential and actively contribute to the sustainable development of agriculture. Mobilizing resources for women's agriculture is not a secondary topic in our agendas. It is a political priority encompassing three major challenges of our times: food security, green transition, and social justice. Our commitment must be to create an environment conducive to female entrepreneurship by supporting women and recognizing the value they bring to the agricultural sector. Only then can we build a more equitable future. In order to mobilize resources and finance women-owned agricultural projects, an integrated approach is needed, combining financial instruments, training, regulatory reforms, and international cooperation. We must turn words into action, achieve equality, and pave the way for a future in which women play a key role in bringing about change, including in agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is our honorable colleague from the Pan-African Parliament. Please welcome to the floor. And unfortunately, I didn't get your name, so please introduce yourself. Welcome very warmly.
Je vais m'exprimer en français, c'est plus facile.
I'm going to speak in French. It's going to be easier for me. Thank you, co-chairs. I'm not going to make a statement or a declaration, but instead I'm going to make some suggestions to adopt innovative approaches. May seem inconceivable, but just because it's a dream doesn't mean we can't fulfill that dream. In her presentation, the presenter gave me some ideas, but there are limits to these approaches. She talked about setting up cooperatives for women, but where I come from in West Africa, cooperatives are not popular, so setting up cooperatives of this kind are very difficult. The guarantees or the collateral for these collectives are limited. The guarantee funds are also limited in scope. But the most important criterion, as far as I can see, based on my last 30 years of helping women to get financing, is credit risks. We know that women come with risks. Who can have, what can have an impact on risk? Well, it's the central banks that set the risk levels. But if we parliamentarians went to our central banks and we said to them, you need to be more gender sensitive and you need to contribute to development. If we asked them to rethink risk linked to women, to lower the risk level for women. Well, this attitude would mean that banks, other financial institutions, insurance companies would be more likely to want to finance women. So let's try to put some pressure on central banks. Our central banks in Africa need to act as development banks as well. If they just put 1 or 2% of their budgets to one side, then that could solve women's problems, I believe. So let's try to put pressure on our central banks to become gender sensitive and to lower the risk profiles for women so that women can get more financing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for this. The next speaker will be from Mauritius. I will invite Honourable Marie Roxana Collette, Member of Parliament, to the podium here, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and esteemed guests. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, South Africa, for the presidency of the 11th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit. I would start by saying that the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And I'm sure that the women we are fighting for believe in their dreams. And how can we make their dreams become reality? So, I am a member of the Mauritius National Assembly, as well as the Parliamentary Gender Caucus. The caucus is a dedicated parliamentary structure tasked with reviewing government's action and budgets through a gender lens, and we have a role of lobbying for change towards sustainable development in the agribusiness sector and agroeconomy. So the government of Mauritius, with the support of international partners, has officially embarked on initiatives to implement gender-responsive budgeting. Whilst this is an ongoing process, I admit that the government has identified key entry points for mainstreaming gender perspectives into what we call the program-based budgeting exercise, PBB. Our government has been working on this, but a key challenge remains its effective implementation and parliamentary scrutiny. So if I may ask here today, how do we feel that parliaments can best operationalize our G20 commitments and hold ministries accountable? What role has our national parliaments played in ensuring that budgets are gender responsive? I shared a little bit of a perspective from Mauritius, but we have to see if there are any legislative or oversight mechanisms that can be put in place to monitor all this. For sure, there are primary challenges that our parliaments face in overseeing financial flows. And if any of our speakers today could respond to that, and for sure, before ending the session, we could have proposed solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleague from Mauritius. I have the next speaker who comes from the Mpumalanga Legislature in South Africa, Honorable Ndlovu.
Thank you, Speaker and Chairperson. Greetings to everyone. My name is Nkate Ndlovu, coming all the way from Mpumalanga, where the sun rises. And where agriculture in Mpumalanga, it's mostly productive, that side. So it will be wrong for us to come here and we talk about agriculture and we don't make meaningful contributions in the topic. So women are making up half of a global agricultural workforce, yet they continue to face several barriers that limit their productivity. Economic independency and leadership potential. Those challenges include unequal and land rights, restrict access to finance and inclusions from training and markets, and the burden of unpaid care work. So with this problem, despite their critical roles, the food production and rural livelihood in women is very essential. Globally, we are now in 15%, having 15% of women owning land globally. We are receiving less than 10% of available credit that is strictly put aside for women. We have limited access to training and inputs in markets. With these challenges, I therefore propose that to different countries, we have to look into the land reform and legal empowerment in ensuring women equal rights to own, inherit, and control land, support land titling programs that recognize joint or individual female ownership, which our later speaker has already emphasized in this issue. And also, we must also promote gender-responsive credit and saving products, partner with microfinances and institutions, even mobile banking to reach out rural women in our rural communities who are far away from accessing most of the funds that are available that will be made available for women in agriculture. Further, support women in cooperatives and market access. It's important that we improve rural infrastructure, our roads, transport and storage to connect women to our markets because they do their farms, their farm work far away from the markets, and it's even difficult for them to interconnect or work with markets to get markets in their communities. We must also address the gender-based violence in agriculture because gender-based violence is a skin cancer that we are having for women. It's not just in leadership position, it goes far and deep also into agriculture. We must develop a safe reporting system and protecting mechanism for women in agricultural spaces. We must also train agricultural extension safe on gender sensitivity and prevent and GBV prevention. It's also important that we mandate women to be represented in agricultural boards, units, and policy forums so that they can be in their position to have first-hand information in any information that is related to women. We must also create platform for women farmers to influence national agricultural strategy. If we can do this thing effectively, we have a potential to increase our productivity between 20% to 30% globally. Also, it can also assist in our high household income, better nutrition and education for children. Because when you train a woman, you train a nation. Our children will also be empowered to also join the agricultural sector. We can also have a stronger rural economy, and more effectively, we can have a more sustainable food system because in anything that a woman touches, woman blesses. So when we are having our women doing more in agriculture, we have a power to multiply. We are blessed like that. So our sustainability in food, it means we are having the capacity to multiply our food and save the nation. We can also urge these policies to be covered in all municipalities or legislature and national parliaments. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kateko Ndlovu. Colleagues, I am going to, that was our last speaker who had indicated that they would like to speak. And at this moment, I would like to open the floor to all other members to raise their hands and raise their issues, whether it's a question or interaction with the Tabi. You are now welcome. Okay, I'll have to stand up. Noted, one honorable member. There's no other hand, so you can speak. I have two more. May I see the hands that were raised? Oh, okay, so let me start there and end with you, honorable member here.
I'm Karabo Tebogo Magagane from the Northwest. My one, it's more general on how we're discussing and our measurements that we will use in terms of how do we measure this progress, because all the speakers have said we need to be able to measure progress when it comes to women. And we do have the Human Development Index, but from our discussions so far, it says that it is not comprehensive enough to measure impact, especially when it comes to women. So as women, what can we propose that would be more inclusive? Because the Human Development Index does really look at, for instance, well-being of women, of everybody, but it does not specifically then look at women. And one of the things is that what Professor Bola said earlier on about dignity, we don't have a measure that then looks at women financial inclusion. And in all our topics, we've talked about inclusion and financial inclusion. So what could we actually bring about as this congregation here, and how can we change that? And then in terms of the SDGs, there is nothing that really talks about financial inclusion. And Tabi here was talking about credit risk, which is a big part of financial inclusion. And she talked about the barriers to credit risks, and she outlined them very well. But as we look at Goal 5, yes, some of the outcomes should be financial inclusion. But currently, we do not have a specific one that says women financial inclusion, so that we actually then start having strategic ways to actually ensure that there is better distribution of resources, but mostly also to actually counteract those credit risks. I'd say what proponents of credit risk, and then how do we then change the disproportionate structural inequality of our policies? I think for me, I would want us to really look into this and delve into this and come up with resolutions for these. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, honorable member.
Thank you, honorable co-chairs. Chairperson, one would want to acknowledge presentations before and statements made by other members from different countries. And one can affirm that we all have common challenges as women globally with regards to involvement of women in agriculture. But Chair, I want to speak with regards to what Honorable Nkateko from Mpumalanga has raised in terms of an example, to say we cannot measure GBVF or make example that GBVF is like a skin cancer. So I don't want that matter to be noted as such, because we know skin cancer is not invited, or it's not something that you can say that it's not gonna, affect you or what. But with GBVF, it's because of social behavior of those who think that they've got more rights than other people. So I just wanted to say, perhaps that statement is unfortunate in this fora, because when she started relating to GBVF as skin cancer, like there was discomfort where I'm seated with regards to that. But I want to accept as well the presentation that she's made with regards to what caused distraction in the involvement of women in the economy. And lastly, through you, Chair, with the steering committee members who are here from the multi-party caucus of South African Parliament, Member Dujwa, I think this platform exposed us to the fact that we need to use academias and professionals in our women caucus to actually come and reshape our decision makers as parliamentarians, like Ms. Thabi Nkosi. So I think I want to say to yourselves, in our next sessions, because at times we speak about GBVF and other issues, not tackling other economic sectors, it is important that we invite them to come and share these practices to us so that we can take better decisions as parliamentarians. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to take it that was the last hand that we've had. So I am going to invite Thabi back on the stage to come and make your closing comments, and maybe if there are responses that you would like to share with us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, honourable members, for those reflections. I must say I'm quite encouraged by the reports from various countries, because it shows that we are indeed, I think, aligned when it comes to the approaches that do work. We have learned from each other and really realized that there are certain fundamentals that we need to adopt, and it's encouraging to see those. One thing perhaps I would like to say, so what I outlined earlier are general best practices and things that I have seen work. And I do acknowledge that in various countries, these may not be practical. But I'd like us to take away the concept behind it. So for instance, if cooperatives, for instance, honorable member, may not be popular as a structure in West Africa, what we need to focus on are any other mechanisms of aggregating women together, because that is actually what the cooperative really serves to achieve. So whether this be in a cooperative, whether it is in a trust, we see trusts working quite well, or in any other legal structure, but the concept is that in essence, where women come together and they're able to negotiate as a collective, we tend to see better results. The issue around data and the type of things that we track has come through quite clearly. So the point about the Human Development Index and other points around financial inclusion and how we measure those are quite important. And I think that the challenge here, as you sit as parliamentarians, is really decide how to hold each other to account and what measures you would want to track across the various countries, and perhaps what you would like to be held accountable for here. I wouldn't want to conclude without perhaps acknowledging the Speaker of South Africa for many of these initiatives that I've highlighted here. So a lot of these initiatives that I've highlighted, blended finance, de-risking, weather-linked insurance projects, she pioneered as the Minister of Agriculture in South Africa. And when I chaired the Land Bank, and she had been preaching this message since the 90s. And so when I started to chair the Land Bank, I really engaged with her, and we started to put a lot of what she had been saying into practice. And we launched the blended finance program, and we launched the index insurance project for the first time. And these are things that she had been preaching. And so I really would like to acknowledge that they do work. And we do have a member in the House who has championed these initiatives before. Honourable members, I really think that I don't have much to add from the comments that have already been made here. I do think that at the back of our minds, if we keep the 2 points that we need to address, credit risk and transaction costs at the forefront, we can really start to craft credible solutions. Anything that we propose needs to address those two things if we are to see a tangible impact. Thank you so much, well, everyone.
Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you very much once more, Tabi. And we couldn't emphasize more the role that that was played and that for many years were played by the Honorable Speaker, Honorable Toko Titiza, as the former minister indeed. And we always are appreciative of the work that you have started, Minister, and we hope that it will continue to serve women. Now, colleagues, just before I request my co-chair to come and close the session, I want to indicate that in our discussion, yes, I'm very glad also that we have reflected on many challenges of women, and we also brought in, proposals that can actually assist women. We spoke about the cooperative loans, your supply chain processes, and importantly, we also recognize that unless these instruments are gender responsive and designed with women in mind, the gaps will always persist. And therefore, our role as parliamentarians indeed is to make sure that we work together to dismantle these barriers and promote innovative models that put women at the center of the agricultural financing. And in South Africa, Tabi has already spoken about these projects and the programs, the schemes that are there that are assisting women and to make sure that women grow into commercial farmers. So as a parting shot, colleagues, I want us to agree that as we live here, we live with one commitment to turn these conversations that we've had here into action so that women-led cooperatives in particular, that we can learn from other countries, cooperatives and projects that are fully funded and fully supported and fully recognized as drivers of transformation, because if we empower women, women are not only just food producers, but they are nation builders. On that note, my co-chair, Honorable Sheldon Moss. Thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause?
Thank you very much, Honorable Pule. And also big thanks from my side to all your contributions here today. I think we have learned a lot, but two messages that, we need to close the funding gaps. But as you said, Ms. Nkosi, also remember that funding women in agriculture is in fact a good business, and we need to remember that as well. So with that, I want to close the fourth working session, and thank you for your contributions. And then I will give the floor back to the Deputy Speaker, Dr. Lotriet, to come up with announcements. Oh, I just saw her, and now she left again. Can we maybe call the Deputy Speaker back to the room to announce the rest of the program for this afternoon, because we are running ahead of schedule, which is unusual, but it's also nice. Oh, there she is again. Deputy Speaker, Dr. Lotriet, I will give you the floor to come up with the announcements of what we're going to do the rest of the afternoon, but I know that there should be a tea break at 3:30. Please, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for contributing to this very good working session 4. Thank you.
Let's give my co-chair a round of applause as the Deputy Speaker approaches.
Honourable delegates, I also want to, from my side, thank the co-chairs, also Ms. Nkosi. Thank you so much. Very valuable inputs. Once again, like yesterday, efficient. So we are quite ahead of time. So there is a proposal that we continue with the last session now, which won't be a long session. I just want to make sure, if we could perhaps just wait 5 minutes so that we make sure that everyone is in the venue that should be here, because there are a few countries missing. So just relax for 5 minutes, and then we will conclude with the last session.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
So we close the session for 5 minutes and then we're back. Thank you.
It's a very important announcement, and I want to believe that you want to hear it. So we wait for the others to come back so that we announce.
Yes, I was suggesting
Okay.
that maybe after the 5 minutes break,
Yes.
then you
Okay.
can announce.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. We'll do that. Members, good afternoon once more, and welcome to the last session of the day. Yeah, we are almost at the end of the session, so I want to welcome you back. I thought that, Honorable Speaker, I thought that I was going to be able to get the full house. Unfortunately, I lost my bell, so I couldn't ring it for everyone else. And we appreciate that, colleagues, you're back. I hope that you took a nice 5 minutes break. So in the last session here, we're going to take 2 speakers. And before I take the speakers, I must make that announcement I wanted to make earlier on. So, courtesy of the speaker, Honorable Togoti Diza, this afternoon or this evening, she is inviting all of us as women parliamentarians and everyone who's here who would like to join her at the Rock restaurant in Hermanas, just outside here, in Hermanas, for dinner. Hermanas is known for whale watching. I hope that honorable members will be able to do that probably on Friday, because it's already late today and the speaker is only inviting us for dinner. So everyone who's interested in going there, please register with Honorable Mananiso. Honorable Mananiso, may you please stand up? There she is. So everyone who's interested in going, they will register with Honorable Mananiso from the National Council of Provinces of South Africa. And then transport will be standing outside. So the registration is purely meant to ascertain the numbers of people who will be going there for transport purposes. Thank you very much. Immediately when we finish here. Immediately after the session, after the 2 speakers, of course, we can wait a few minutes for members to freshen up and stretch, and then we go to the dinner at the Rock. So thank you very much. I thought it is very important that we start with that announcement. Now, we are going to have the reading of the final joint statement and the official adoption of this joint statement, colleagues. And to do that, we will invite the Honorable Finis from the National Council of Provinces of South Africa, the other house of Parliament. Honorable Finis, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Honorable Pule. Allow me to stand on the protocol that is established already. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chair of the NCOP. Let me present the draft joint declaration of the second P20 meeting of women parliamentarians in Cape Town, South Africa. We, the P20 women parliamentarians, have convened during the G20 Parliamentary Forum held on 29 and 30 September 2025 in Cape Town, South Africa, to address ongoing challenges, assess developments, and formulate recommendations to strengthen G20 parliamentary and government capacity to advance women's empowerment and their full, equal, and meaningful participation in sustainable development and economic growth, in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Number 2, we reaffirm the foundational importance of the inaugural P20 meeting of women parliamentarians held during the G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit P20, recognizing this multilateral forum as an essential platform for enhancing women parliamentarians' strategic involvement in G20 decision-making processes and for advancing women's rights. Number 3, we reiterate our commitment to the decisions of the 10th G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit P20 held in Brasilia, Brazil, to advance women's empowerment and meaningful participation through targeted measures that address existing gaps and barriers. We firmly embrace parliamentary diplomacy as a crucial tool for building consensus across diverse political systems and promoting legislative cooperation to advance initiatives on equal rights between men and women. Number 4, we will endeavor to sustain action in the priority areas identified during our deliberations, create an enabling environment to advance women's rights, empowerment, and participation in sustainable development policies, work towards the greatest level of consistency between legislation and universally agreed human rights, standards such as Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and other relevant international and regional instruments. Number 6, eliminate all forms of discrimination against women in law and in practice and adopt right-affirming legislation and gender-responsive policies. Number 7, advance the commitment to achieving gender parity at all levels of decision-making and in all areas, in line with CEDAW Committee General Recommendation number 40 and as enshrined in the declaration adopted by the 15th Summit of Women Speakers of Parliament, Geneva, July 2025, and in the Plan of Action for Gender Parity in Parliaments adopted at the IPU Global Conference of Women's Parliamentarians in Mexico City, March 2025. Make governance and budgeting gender responsive. Number 8, emphasize the importance of sharing parliamentary best practices on gender responsive budgeting, with a particular focus on integrating these frameworks into national budgets to support climate policies, strategies, and action plans that address the differentiated impacts and challenges faced by women and girls. Number 9, strengthen legislation, policies, and related parliamentary oversight mechanisms to ensure transparent, targeted allocation of resources for gender equality through gender-sensitive budgeting frameworks. Number 10, endeavor to enact, strengthen, and enforce inclusive legislative measures that address the diverse needs of women and girls across age, disability, race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic factors. Number 11, accelerate the development of sex disaggregated evidence-based policies to improve women's health, education, and economic opportunities. Number 12, create and sustain effective partnerships with civil society organizations advocating for gender equality and the empowerment of women in diverse situations and conditions, ensuring that women's voices inform policy development. Number 13, advocate for the creation of transparent, accountable governance systems that prioritize human rights and guarantee their meaningful participation in decision-making processes at the local, national, and international levels. Number 14, ensure women-led development and leadership in key governance agendas, including health, trade, technological governance, and peace and security, recognizing the essential contribution of women to the formulation of inclusive and sustainable policies. Make care a pillar of sustainable development. Number 15, promote comprehensive care policies and systems, as well as funding mechanisms that allow for investments in transformative care policies as part of efforts to attain decent work for all, as well as of the fight against hunger and poverty. Number 16, introduce measures to recognize, mitigate, redistribute, and value unpaid care and domestic work performed by women and girls, acknowledging the impact of such work on the participation of women and girls in decision-making, leadership, and education, as well as on their economic opportunities. Ensure women's leadership in crisis management and disaster response. Number 17, support legislative reforms that institutionalize and advance women's full, equal, and meaningful participation and leadership in climate change mitigation and adaptation and disaster risk management efforts, developing effective disaster risk mitigation mechanisms at all levels. Number 18, encourage the adoption of policy frameworks and the allocation of resources for gender-responsive strategies to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and ensure their implementation through parliamentary oversight and regular accountability assessments. Number 19, combat the alarming prevalence and gender-based violence during disasters and armed conflict by establishing immediate response mechanisms, providing support services, and guaranteeing women and girls access to crucial resources and information. Number 20, eliminate all discriminatory legal and policy barriers that hinder women's participation in crisis management and allocate resources for this purpose. Number 21, strengthen mechanisms for compliance with international humanitarian law to safeguard women's full enjoyment of human rights in emergencies. Number 22, fully implement United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325/2000 on women, peace and security, as well as subsequent resolutions constituting the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. 23, ensure accountability and end impunity for perpetrators of gender-based violence through strengthened legal frameworks, effective prosecution, and survivor-centered justice system. 24, guarantee access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care services for victims of rape, including contraception, safe and legal abortion, and prevention and treatment of sexually transmitted infections. Make energy transition financing gender inclusive. 25, provide for women's participation in decision-making processes in the energy sector, including through the procurement of energy-related products and services from women-owned small and medium-sized enterprises. 26, review and reform legislation to streamline contracting procedures and eliminate bureaucratic barriers and establish dedicated support mechanisms such as targeted capacity building programs on bidding, financial literacy, and market access strategies for women-owned energy businesses. 27, encourage the private sector to develop specialized financial instruments that provide accessible capital for women entrepreneurs in the energy sector. Empower women economically through agricultural development. 28, where necessary, urgently review legal frameworks to guarantee women's equal land ownership and inheritance rights, removing all discriminatory provisions in line with Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. 29, promote government-private sector partnerships to establish a gender-responsive financial services ecosystem, including collateral-free loans, microfinance programs, and financial literacy training covering budgeting and investment strategies. 30, accelerate the expansion of digital banking infrastructure to enhance access to services for women-owned agricultural enterprises, particularly in rural and underserved communities. 31, provide technical assistance and rural extension services that empower women in the production, storage, processing, marketing, and comprehension use of staple foods, thereby increasing value addition and income generation. 32, strengthen management skills and promote the organization of women's associations, cooperatives, and collective enterprises with the aim of integrating them into agricultural value chains. 33, promote the economic empowerment of indigenous women by ensuring equitable access to land and productive resources, decent work, and financial independence, while valuing their traditional knowledge in sustainable agriculture. Ensure climate policies are gender responsive. 34, encourage the G20 to implement ambitious gender responsive climate policies that advance gender equality while enhancing climate action, that respect diverse cultural contexts, and that are designed through consultations, ensuring the local realities informed agree commitments to human rights and gender equality. 35, support just transitions to ensure workers have access to retaining opportunities and by promoting the creation of decent, paid, and equal employment opportunities for women in emerging clean energy sectors in line with Brisbane Goal and the International Labour Organization's decent work standards. 36, welcome the extension of the enhanced Lima work program on gender for a 10-year period and encourage G20 governments to implement its provisions through national action plans with clear timelines, dedicated budgets, and accountability mechanisms. Encourage adequate reporting in national submissions under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, including measurable outcomes in promoting women's participation in climate decision-making and policy development. 37, promote and implement policies that strengthen women's access to education and career, skills training, and vocational programs in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, ensuring equal opportunities for their employability, participation, and leadership in just transitions. Accelerate women's climate leadership. 38, urgently call on the G20 to accelerate efforts to increase women's meaningful participation, partnership, decision-making, and leadership in climate change mitigation and adaptation and disaster risk reduction strategies, including by delivering gender-responsive, environment-resilient solutions, particularly in waste management, sanitation, and hygiene systems, to build resilience against climate impacts and environmental degradation. Recognize the leadership of Indigenous women in advancing sustainable, locally grounded solutions and defending territories against environmental degradation. Support sustainable agricultural practices. 39, encourage the G20 to establish comprehensive support systems that provide women in vulnerable situations with access to climate-smart technologies, research funding, and technical skills training to address the impacts of climate change on agriculture. 40, encourage the G20 to create dedication funding mechanisms for women in partnership with the private sector and implement capacity building programs that transfer knowledge and enhance agricultural resilience. 41, encourage context-sensitive interventions for women farmers and agricultural entrepreneurs that prioritize rural and underserved areas in order to avoid leaving women behind in climate adaptation efforts. 42, encourage the G20 to establish transparent and accountable mechanisms for tracking, reporting, and auditing climate finance flows, ensuring that resources reach women-led agricultural initiatives and contribute to measurable outcomes in resilience, food security, and economic empowerment. Following our productive deliberations at the second P20 meeting of women parliamentarians conducted in the spirit of parliamentary diplomacy, this declaration will be circulated among all participants for review and feedback before its formal submission to the G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit. G20. We support the implementation of these provisions through our respective parliaments and view P20 meetings of women parliamentarians as important platforms for exchanging experiences and reporting on progress towards these targets, including challenges encountered and solutions developed. We express our gratitude to the P20 presidency and commend all women parliamentarians who contributed their expertise, leadership, and dedication to the success of this gathering. Their collective commitment has shaped these deliberations and strengthened our shared resolve to advance gender equality and women's empowerment as fundamental pillars of G20 decision-making processes, paving the way for more inclusive, equitable global progress. I just want the delegates to note this last one. It is recognized that some participants, owing to their constitutional positions or other factors, may not directly associate themselves with substantive political statements and therefore should not be seen as indicating specific support for all sections of this joint statement. However, on behalf of these chambers, they acknowledge the importance of the issues raised in the joint statement and support the spirit of their colleagues in proposing particular ways forward. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Honorable Fennes. Thank you very much, honorable members. I would now invite countries for the official adoption of the joint statement. You will indicate by show of the country when you're ready to come. Am I seeing the UK?
Can you please explain what you want us to do? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. My request is to request countries to come forward to comment on the adoption of this draft declaration. of the P20 meeting of women parliamentarians. Yes, let me see. Okay, you want to speak? That's
The Interparliamentary Union.
Interparliamentary Union, yes. Please, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I had the pleasure of addressing remarks on behalf of the IPU president yesterday. And indeed, we have been greatly honored these past few weeks, actually, to work closely with our colleagues in parliaments from all of the G20 countries and the invited guests on the very robust and substantive draft outcome document that had been prepared by the host parliament. And even this morning, all of us, people in the room, as well as representatives from delegations that maybe are not in the room right now, have had the opportunity to do a final reading. I think everyone is incredibly impressed with the quality of the discussions, with the substantive nature of the document. And unless I am mistaken, the indication from this morning is that everyone would be delighted to support by acclamation this draft outcome document that has just been presented.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Thank you so much, my appreciation. Can we give ourselves a round of applause again, Honorable Members? Thank you very much. Now we have come to the last item, Honorable Speaker. I'm looking at the Honorable Member Gancho, who's supposed, oh, there she is, yeah. Honorable Deputy Speaker, you'll come back later. Let me acknowledge Honorable Gancho. Please come and give us the closing remarks.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Speakers, distinguished parliamentarians, fellow delegates, and advocates for gender equality. I am honored to deliver these closing remarks, a powerful global call to action, synthesizing our collective resolve. The evidence is undeniable. Achieving gender equality is not a matter of choice. It is a strategic imperative for inclusive growth, sustainable development, and a more resilient democracy. Gender inequality costs world economic trillions of dollars annually, acting as a massive drag on our potential. We are missing out on prosperity. Analysis shows that even a small increase in female employment could boost national economies significantly. Sorry. If we seek prosperity, we must invest in women. Our central unified message to parliaments worldwide is this: you must embed gender equality into the core of policy and law, not treat it as a side issue. We must utilize legislative power to mandate and enforce economic justice and climate resilience. Gender-sensitive budgeting, this is the ultimate tool for accountability. We must require every budget item to be scrutinized through a gender lens to ensure public money is distributed fairly, reaching the most vulnerable, especially rural women. We must ensure the full implementation of laws to close economic inequality. These include tackling pay differentials, ensuring employees earn the same for the same job, regardless of their contract status, and enshrining equality in wages, ownership, and financial services. We must, without hesitation, legislate for land tenure and land rights for women everywhere. Furthermore, we must address the critical barrier of access to capital, building on promising initiatives that mobilize substantial funding for women-led businesses. Women should hold key portfolios, proving we don't just belong to soft areas, we belong in every seat of power. Parliaments must establish platforms such as women's caucuses to advance women's interests and transform cultural and traditional norms rooted in patriarchy. The fight for parity continues. We must reverse the regression in women's political representation by breaking down social barriers and providing training, support, and solidarity mechanisms. Furthermore, honorable members, we must address dual burden of care. Policies that expand free childcare and officially recognize women's unpaid domestic work are not hands out. They are essential infrastructure for a productive economy. Our discussions highlighted the urgent need for targeted internal value chain and enhanced procurement from women-owned enterprises. We need to address women's lack of access to finance and reduce collateral risks by encouraging banks to recognize different types of collaterals. We must invest in building climate resilience through women's cooperatives and broader enterprises. To every parliamentarian, we issue this final urgent challenge. Let us not just be advocates. Let us be legislators of change. We urge you to use your powers for empowering girls and women through education and mentorship, strong legislative oversight on all existing gender equality laws, gender mainstreamed budgets across the sector, inclusive public hearings that represent the marginalized, annual reporting on gender equality progress and expenditures. Lastly, strengthening women's access to finance and resource mobilization in the agricultural sector. I'm mentioning that again. Parliamentarians must become the center of women's transformation. Let us ensure that the future we build fully protects the talent, creativity, and leadership of all women. In this spirit, honorable members and colleagues, let us ensure that no woman is left behind. Let us take these resolutions to our parliaments for immediate implementation. I thank you. Watindu mama, watindu bokoto, watindu bokoto.
Watindu ma.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kancho. Dr. Lotri, Honorable Deputy Speaker, you're welcome. Thank you very much. Let's give her a round of applause, please.
Thank you so much, Honourable Pule, and thank you to our co-chairs as well as our final speaker. We are now at the end of the 2 days. I think hard work has been done, valuable work, and it is now up to us to take it forward. So in closing then, our gratitude on behalf of the Speaker, the Chairperson of the NCOP, and all that is left for me to say is that we will now have a group photo outside at the main entrance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Are we doing it now? No.
The announcement on going to
So, honourable members, as you heard the Deputy Speaker, we have to go outside now at the foyer, at the entrance of the hotel for the group photo. Thank you very much.